In the year 410, a Roman citizen woke up to the sound of a foreign army marching through the gates of Rome. Not the gates of some distant frontier fort, the gates of Rome itself, a city that hadn't been captured by an outside enemy in nearly 800 years. For 8 centuries, saying, "I am a Roman citizen," meant something. It meant protection. It meant power. It meant you belonged to the most dominant force the world had ever seen. And in less than one lifetime, all of it came apart. This isn't a story about barbarians at the gates. The barbarians were the easy part. This is a story about how the most powerful empire in human history was hollowed out from the inside, long before anyone outside ever landed a real blow. It starts small, almost absurdly small. Around 753 BC, Rome was a cluster of huts on a hill next to a river, one of dozens of similar settlements scattered across central Italy. Nothing about it suggested it would ever be more than a regional power, let alone rule 3 continents. What made Rome different wasn't a genius king or a stroke of luck. It was a decision, repeated over and over across centuries. When Rome conquered a people, it didn't just enslave them or tax them from a distance. Eventually, it made them Roman. A defeated tribe in Gaul, given generations, could become citizens. Their sons could serve in the legions. Their grandsons could sit in the Senate. This is almost unheard of in the ancient world. Most empires ruled over subjects. Rome built citizens. That single idea is why Rome didn't just conquer territory. It absorbed it. By 200 BC, Rome controlled the entire Italian peninsula. A century later, it controlled the Mediterranean. By 27 BC, after a century of civil war nearly tore the Republic apart, one man, Augustus, ended the chaos by becoming the first emperor in all but name. And what followed was almost 200 years of something historians still marvel at: the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. At its height, under Emperor Trajan, around 117 AD, the empire stretched from Britain to Iraq, from Portugal to Egypt. An estimated 60 to 70 million people, perhaps a quarter of everyone alive on Earth at the time, lived under Roman law. Roads connected it. Aqueducts fed it. A common currency traded across it. A letter could travel from London to Damascus on infrastructure that wouldn't be matched again in Europe for over 1,000 years. This was the peak, and almost no one alive at the time could have imagined it ending. Empires don't collapse the moment they're weakest. They collapse long after the first cracks appear, while everyone insists things are still fine. The first real crack wasn't a battle, it was a currency. To pay for an increasingly expensive military and an increasingly bloated bureaucracy, emperors began quietly reducing the silver content in Roman coins. A denarius that was once 90% silver dropped to 50%, then to almost nothing. A coin that looked the same, but was worth a fraction of what it claimed to be. This is one of history's earliest documented cases of currency debasement causing runaway inflation. Prices spiraled. Trust in Roman money, the same trust that had bound the empire's economy together for centuries, started to erode. At the same time, the political system that had produced steady leadership for generations turned unstable. In the 50 years between 235 and 284 AD, a period historians call the crisis of the 3rd century, Rome had over 20 different emperors. Most were murdered by their own soldiers or rivals within a few years, sometimes within months, of taking power. Imagine trying to run a global superpower when the person in charge changes every 18 months, usually via assassination. Long-term planning became almost impossible. Border defenses were neglected because no emperor stayed in office long enough to see a decades-long strategy through. And the empire kept growing anyway, spread across a territory so vast that no single army could defend every border at once. The strength that had built Rome, its sheer size, was quietly becoming its greatest liability. By the time Emperor Diocletian split the empire in two in 285 AD, east and west, to make it more manageable, it was already an admission. One empire, one government, could no longer hold what Rome had built. The western half never really recovered. Migration pressure from Central Asia pushed Germanic tribes, the Goths, the Vandals, the Franks, toward Rome's borders, not as raiders looking for plunder, but as entire peoples looking for somewhere to live. Rome had absorbed outsiders before. It had built an empire on the idea, but by the 4th and 5th centuries, it no longer had the political stability, the money, or the military cohesion to do it on its own terms. In 410 AD, the Visigoths, led by Alaric, did something that hadn't happened in nearly 800 years. They sacked Rome itself. The city survived. But the psychological blow was enormous. St. Jerome, writing from the Middle East when he heard the news, described it as the world plunged into darkness. The city that had taken the whole world was itself taken. It wasn't the end. Not yet. But it was the sound of something breaking that would never fully be repaired. Over the next 66 years, the Western Roman Empire kept shrinking, losing territory, losing tax revenue, losing the ability to field the kind of legions that had once made it untouchable. Emperors became puppets, installed and removed by the actual power brokers, Germanic generals who had risen through the same Roman military system that once excluded them. Finally, in 476 AD, a Germanic general named Odoacer removed the last Western Roman emperor, a teenager named Romulus Augustulus, a name that, in a detail almost too poetic to be true, echoed both Rome's legendary founder and its first emperor. No great battle marked the end. No dramatic final stand. The Western Roman Empire didn't die in a single catastrophic moment. It simply stopped being propped up, because there was no longer anything left to prop up. Here's the detail that makes this story worth telling 1,500 years later. Rome didn't actually disappear. The eastern half, what we now call the Byzantine Empire, survived for another 1,000 years, until 1453. Roman law became the foundation for legal systems across Europe. Latin splintered into French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian. The Catholic Church preserved Roman administrative structure inside its own hierarchy for over a millennium after the empire itself was gone. Rome's fall wasn't really an ending. It was a redistribution of language, law, religion, and governance into the foundations of the world that came after it. The empire that once made, "I am a Roman citizen," the most powerful sentence a person could say, didn't vanish. It dissolved into everything that came next. And that's the real lesson buried in Rome's collapse. The things that make an empire strong, its size, its wealth, its complexity, are usually the same things that eventually make it impossible to hold together. Rome didn't fall because it was weak. It fell because it was too big to be simple and too complicated to fix in time.